The galaxy was a vast sea of stars, filled with civilizations that had risen and fallen long before humanity ever launched its first rocket. Among those civilizations stood the Vakari Confederation, a proud union of advanced worlds known for their discipline and their long history of careful strategy. To them, war was mathematics, diplomacy was patience, and peace was simply a pause before the next great conflict. When their explorers first encountered Earth, the Vakari were curious more than anything. Humanity was young by galactic standards. Their homeworld was only just beginning to explore beyond its star system. Yet the humans greeted the Vakari with words, not weapons. They spoke of trade, knowledge, and cultural sharing. For the first time in many cycles, the Vakari were surprised. Ambassadors from both species met in orbit above Mars. The humans were cautious but hopeful, sending representatives dressed in simple suits, their faces bright with determination. The Vakari arrived in ceremonial armor, their tall frames covered in polished plates, their voices calm and measured. The meeting stretched for weeks, with translators working day and night. At last, a treaty was signed. The humans agreed to share their growing trade routes and resources, while the Vakari promised protection and access to their vast libraries of science and history. On Earth, people celebrated this new friendship, seeing it as proof that humanity could stand among the stars as equals, but not everyone believed so. Within the Vakari High Council, there were whispers. The humans, they said, were too reckless. Their history of endless wars on their own planet showed them to be unstable. Their technology was clever but untested compared to centuries of Vakari engineering. "They are children with fire in their hands," one counselor remarked. "We must guide them, not treat them as equals." The humans heard none of these whispers. They worked hard to show themselves as partners. Scientists exchanged knowledge, artists shared music, and merchants opened markets. The bond seemed real. Still, beneath the surface, the Vakari military saw humanity as a curiosity at best, and a liability at worst. Then came the border war. The Zorthal swarm, an old enemy of the Confederation, began raiding colonies near the edge of Vakari space. The swarm was different from the disciplined Vakari. They were aggressive, fast, and merciless, fighting with numbers rather than precision. The Vakari fleets, though powerful, were stretched thin. The humans, eager to prove themselves, offered help. Their diplomats argued passionately. "If we are partners," said one ambassador, "then we must share the burden of defense. Allow us to stand with you." The Vakari Council debated long and hard. Some laughed at the idea of humans joining their fleets. Others warned it was dangerous to involve such inexperienced allies. In the end, the council allowed a compromise. The humans could send one ship, only one, to accompany a Vakari fleet in battle. It would be a symbolic gesture, nothing more. That ship was the HSS Valiant. The Valiant was not the newest vessel in Earth's Navy. It was old, but upgraded with care over the years. It carried railguns, missile pods, and layers of reinforced armor. Its crew was small compared to the massive Vakari ships, but each member was trained with discipline and pride. At its head stood Captain Elias Kane, a man known for his calm voice and steady judgment. When the Valiant entered Vakari space, many alien officers were unimpressed. To their eyes, it was a small, clumsy ship, nothing compared to the gleaming carriers and cruisers of their fleet. Some even joked it was there only to observe and retreat when the fighting began. Captain Kane said nothing to defend his ship. He simply saluted the Vakari commander and prepared his crew. To him, this mission was not about pride. It was about proving that humanity could endure. The fleets gathered near the border world of Elikar Prime, where the swarm had been sighted. Dozens of Vakari ships formed into perfect formations, shining like blades against the stars. The Valiant took its place at the edge, a lone shadow beside giants. As they waited, human officers observed the alien ships with awe. The Vakari cruisers were larger than cities, bristling with weapons. Their carriers could launch hundreds of fighters at once. Compared to them, the Valiant seemed almost fragile. But Kane reminded his crew of their training. "Size is not everything," he said. "We are here to watch, to learn, and if needed, to act." Hours passed before the enemy appeared. The Zorthal swarm arrived like a storm, their vessels dark and jagged, pouring into the system in great numbers. They wasted no time with words. Weapons flared, and the battle began. The Vakari fleet moved with practiced precision. Their formations tightened, their energy shields locked together like walls of light. They struck with deadly beams, each shot calculated. Yet the swarm did not care for order. They broke apart, encircling the Vakari ships, overwhelming them with wave after wave. The neat formations began to falter. From the Valiant's bridge, Kane watched quietly. His crew shifted uneasily as reports came in of Vakari losses. "Captain," his first officer said, "should we move to assist?" Kane's eyes narrowed as he studied the battle. He saw the rigid patterns of the Vakari failing against the chaos of the swarm. He also saw openings, small weaknesses the enemy left as they pressed too hard. For now, the Valiant held its place. It was not yet time. And so the first battle of this uneasy alliance began, with diplomacy already fading into the background. What mattered now was survival, and in the heart of the storm, one human warship waited for its moment. The Battle of Elikar Prime began in fire. The Zorthal swarm rushed forward like a living tide, their ships jagged and menacing, each one filled with fighters that poured into space like angry insects. Against them, the Vakari fleet moved with perfect precision, their lines locked together like blades of light. At first, the clash seemed balanced. Vakari beams of energy sliced through enemy ships while their heavy shields absorbed the first strikes. But the swarm was relentless. For every vessel destroyed, two more pushed forward. Their fighters darted between the Vakari formations, harassing and distracting the larger ships. Slowly, the perfect order of the fleet began to weaken. From the edge of the battlefield, the HSS Valiant observed. Captain Elias Kane stood at the center of his bridge, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the display. His crew shifted in their seats, their screens flashing red with distress calls. Vakari voices came through the comms, calm but urgent, as their formations bent under pressure. "They are breaking apart," Kane murmured. His first officer, Commander Ruiz, turned to him. "Orders, Captain." "Do we hold position?" Kane's gaze swept over the tactical map. He could see where the Vakari lines were failing, where the swarm pushed too deep, leaving their flanks open. He also saw the hesitation of the Vakari commander, bound by doctrine, unwilling to change formations. "Not yet," Kane said, "but stand ready." Minutes passed like hours. The Vakari fleet fought bravely, but it was clear the swarm's numbers were too great. Gaps opened, ships were isolated, and one by one, proud cruisers vanished in bursts of fire. At last, the order came from the Vakari commander. "Human vessel, withdraw to safety. This is no place for you." Kane did not answer immediately. He studied the battle again, then turned to his crew. His voice was calm, steady, almost quiet. "Prepare all weapons. Target the swarm ships pressing the left flank. We go in." The crew obeyed without question. Engines roared, and the Valiant surged forward. To the Vakari, it was madness. A single small ship charging into the heart of the battle. But the humans did not move like the Vakari. They did not keep rigid formations or follow predictable paths. The Valiant darted and twisted, its railguns thundering as they tore through swarm fighters. Missiles streaked out, each one aimed at weak points in the enemy lines. "Direct hit on enemy cruiser," a human officer shouted. Another voice followed, "Shields holding. Minor damage only." The swarm turned on the Valiant, angered by its sudden presence. Dozens of fighters swarmed toward it, firing wildly. Kane did not flinch. "Rotate shields. Keep moving. Fire in patterns they will not expect." The bridge shook as enemy fire struck, but the Valiant pressed on. Its guns blazed, punching holes through enemy formations. Instead of standing in place, it wove through the chaos, forcing the swarm to chase. Every time they thought they had it cornered, the ship twisted away, leaving wreckage in its wake. On the Vakari command ship, officers stared in disbelief. "They fight with no order," one said. "It is reckless." But another voice spoke with awe. "No, not reckless, adaptive. Look, they strike where we could not." Indeed, the humans were doing what the Vakari could not. Where the Confederation's rigid formations failed, the Valiant thrived in the chaos. Its crew adapted to every shift, every surprise. The ship moved not like a machine, but like a living thing. "Captain, we cannot hold much longer," Commander Ruiz warned as the shields flickered. Kane nodded. "Then we make it count. Target the swarm carrier. Break their coordination." The order was bold, almost impossible. The carrier was massive, surrounded by escorts. But the Valiant did not hesitate. It dove straight into the swarm, guns blazing. Railgun slugs tore through fighters. Missiles slammed into escort ships, breaking their defenses. The swarm tried to block the path, but the Valiant pressed on. On the bridge, alarms screamed, sparks flew. But the crew held their positions. At last they reached firing range of the carrier. "Fire everything," Kane ordered. The ship unleashed its full arsenal. A storm of missiles and slugs hammered the carrier's hull. Explosions ripped through it one after another until the great ship broke apart in a fiery blast. The shock rippled through the swarm. Their fighters scattered, their lines faltered. The Vakari seized the moment. Their commander, finally shaken from doctrine, gave new orders. "All ships advance. Strike them now." The Confederation fleet surged forward, cutting into the disorganized swarm. With the humans carving a path and the Vakari pressing hard, the battle began to turn. One by one, the swarm ships fell. On the Valiant's bridge, silence fell as the last enemy vessel retreated into the dark. The battle was over. The humans had not only survived, they had changed the course of the fight. Across the fleet, Vakari officers spoke in hushed tones. What they had seen was impossible by their standards. One small ship, outnumbered and outgunned, had broken the enemy's strength where dozens of larger ships had failed. When the comms opened, the Vakari commander's voice was heavy with pride and disbelief. "Human vessel, your action saved us. Without you, we would have lost everything." Kane gave a simple reply. "We did only what was needed. You are our allies. We stand together." But even as the words were spoken, every Vakari in that fleet knew something had changed. Diplomacy had brought them together, but battle had revealed the truth. Humans were not weak. They were not reckless children. They were something the galaxy had rarely seen, a species that could fight with both fire and heart, turning chaos into victory. And so the legend of the Valiant began to spread. In the halls of the Confederation, whispers rose. Some called the humans dangerous. Others called them indispensable. But all agreed on one thing: they could no longer be ignored. The war with the swarm was far from over. More battles waited beyond the stars, and in every council, in every fleet, one question now echoed: what would humanity do next? The silence after battle was heavy. Space around Ellicor Prime was littered with wreckage, glowing embers drifting across the void. The Vakari fleet gathered itself, damaged but alive, and at the center of every conversation stood the same name: the human warship, the Valiant. On its bridge, Captain Elias Kane listened to the steady reports. Systems were battered, shields drained, and several decks carried scars from the fight. Yet the crew moved with quiet pride. They had done what no one had expected. They had faced a swarm that nearly crushed an entire fleet, and they had endured. Messages poured in from Vakari ships. Some were formal thanks. Others were words of respect, spoken in tones the humans had never heard from their new allies. Yet beneath the gratitude there was something deeper, something the Vakari themselves struggled to name. For centuries they had believed their way of war was the only way. Discipline, order, flawless calculation. Yet here was a small human ship that had done the impossible by refusing those rules. It had fought with instinct, creativity, and courage, and it had won. The High Council of the Vakari convened soon after. Their chamber was vast, filled with towering figures who had led fleets and ruled worlds. Reports of the battle were read aloud. Holograms displayed how the Valiant had moved, how it had turned chaos into opportunity. Some counselors were uneasy. "They are dangerous," one said. "Their methods break order. Today they saved us, but tomorrow they could turn against us." Others disagreed. "They saved our fleet when no one else could. They do not seek conquest. They seek survival. That is not danger. That is strength." The debate lasted long into the night. Pride battled with reason. Fear wrestled with respect. At last, the High Council reached its decision. The humans were no longer to be treated as junior partners or symbolic allies. They were equals. The news reached the Valiant days later. Captain Kane stood before his crew as the message was read aloud. The Vakari had formally recognized Earth as a trusted ally within the Confederation. Human representatives would now sit beside the most powerful species in the galaxy. The crew cheered, but Kane simply smiled. He knew the cost of such recognition. It was not earned through words or treaties. It had been earned through fire and sacrifice, through the lives risked on the battlefield. Their next test came sooner than anyone expected. The swarm, angered by their defeat at Ellicor Prime, launched another attack, this time against a vital Vakari world. The Confederation fleet prepared to meet them, but this time the formation looked different. No longer was the human ship placed at the edge as a token. The Valiant was positioned at the very center, its orders woven into the core of the battle plan. The change was more than symbolic. It showed trust. It showed that the Vakari had learned. As the fleets moved into position, many Vakari officers found themselves glancing at the Valiant. Its size was small compared to their great cruisers, but its presence gave them confidence. They knew that if the battle turned to chaos, the humans would find a way. When the swarm arrived, the fighting was even fiercer than before. Waves of enemy ships crashed against the Confederation fleet. Beams of light and explosions filled the void. Yet this time the Vakari formations were not as rigid. They adjusted, shifted, and allowed for flexibility. They had learned from the humans. At the heart of it all, the Valiant fought like a spark that lit the fire of the fleet. Kane's voice remained calm as he gave orders, guiding his crew through the storm. The ship darted between larger vessels, striking where the enemy was weak, protecting allies that faltered. Each move inspired those who fought beside them. Hours passed, but the line held. Together, Vakari and human, they pushed the swarm back once more. Victory came not from numbers or size, but from unity. After the battle, the Vakari commander addressed the entire fleet. His voice carried through every ship. Today we stood together as one. The Confederation has gained more than an ally. It has gained brothers and sisters among the stars. Remember this day, for it is the day humanity proved its place among us. For the human crew, those words were more than honor. They were history. Humanity had entered the galaxy not as children to be guided, but as equals who had earned respect through their courage. The legend of the Valiant spread quickly. Traders spoke of it in markets. Soldiers told its story in barracks. Even distant worlds whispered of the tiny human ship that had turned the tide of battle. Wherever the story traveled, it carried the same message. Humans were not to be underestimated. On Earth, when the news arrived, there was celebration. For the first time, the people of the planet felt the weight of their place in the galaxy. They were no longer alone. They had faced the fire and been recognized. Yet for Captain Kane and his crew, the journey was far from over. They knew more battles waited. The swarm would not stop. The galaxy was filled with dangers yet unseen, but now they would not face it alone. And when they did, they carried with them the knowledge that humanity had a voice among the stars. As the Valiant sailed once more into the unknown, Kane stood on the bridge, looking out at the endless dark. His voice was quiet but strong. "Remember this," he told his crew. "We are small among the stars, but never weak. We may not have the largest fleets or the greatest weapons, but we have something more powerful: our will. And as long as we stand together, humanity will endure." The crew nodded, their faces lit by the glow of the stars beyond the glass. The silence of space stretched before them, but in that silence there was no fear, because the galaxy had learned a truth it would never forget. First contact had begun with diplomacy, but true respect had been forged in the fire of battle, when alien armies met one human warship and found in it the heart of a species that would never bow.